around him. And it's not that he was throwing fits and kicking over C-stands and, throwing boxes or anything. And so I'm living that dream, and it's.
On screen, he preached justice, courage, and loyalty. Off screen, people remembered a very different man, sharp, intimidating, and always ready to throw down. Born Izard Danilovich in 1916 to a struggling immigrant family, Douglas clawed his way out of poverty with nothing but sheer grit. By the time Spartacus made him a worldwide legend, he had it all: money, power, respect. But the people who worked with him knew the truth. His temper could shake a room. Crew members said he was impossible to satisfy, snapping without warning, leaving everyone on edge. Actress Deborah Paddett once revealed he didn't just want to lead a scene, he needed to dominate it. Kirk Douglas didn't just want to lead scenes, standing in them. Ron Howard, who studied Douglas's performances while learning the craft, later said there was a quiet rage under that Hollywood smile, the kind that slowly eats a person alive from the inside. That intensity followed Douglas throughout his career, shaping the way everyone on set moved around him. Over the years, old Hollywood insiders shared troubling stories about how he treated women. Some authors and industry insiders even brought up claims from the 1950s involving Natalie Wood, pointing to her sister Lana's comments in a 2018 memoir. These stories have been debated endlessly, and with so many key figures gone, Howard stresses that they reveal more about Hollywood's messy, secretive culture than they do hard facts. Douglas never faced charges, and the controversy simply vanished behind the same wall of silence that protected countless powerful men. Even after his passing in 2020 at 103, the whispers didn't return as gossip. They came back as professionals, finally talking honestly about the dark side of old Hollywood. Douglas had the kind of presence that could lift a set to magical heights or freeze it in tension, inspiring awe one second and fear the next. Stanley Kubrick, who directed him twice, once said Douglas was the most driven man he'd ever met, and also the hardest to control. Ron Howard later reflected that the real lesson in Douglas's career wasn't about acting chops or fame. It was about how unchecked power can bend the rules to one person's favor. Douglas carried himself like nothing applied to him, and the industry let it happen. When Douglas accepted his honorary Oscar in 1996, millions saw an older man trying to close out his life with dignity, but Howard saw something different. The final act of a man who had spent decades running 2 steps ahead of his own inner battles. Behind all the applause lay a truth Hollywood never wanted to face, a reminder that even legends hide shadows that the spotlight can't erase. Some of Hollywood's brightest legends didn't just rise on talent, they built their power on fear, control, and dominance. Faye Dunaway, the queen of cruelty. If Errol Flynn was the face of corruption and Kirk Douglas the embodiment of explosive rage, then Faye Dunaway was a whole other kind of dangerous. To Ron Howard, she proved that darkness in Hollywood didn't always show up as violence. Sometimes it came dressed as ego, humiliation, and a cold, crushing control that could freeze a whole set. Born in 1941 in Bascom, Florida, Dunaway shot to stardom fast. Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, Chinatown in 1974, hit after hit. She looked untouchable, almost mythic with that icy, magnetic presence. But behind the glamour, whispers of her harsh behavior spread through the industry. Crew members spoke of tantrums, impossible demands, and how she treated assistants like disposable props. Actress Rutana Alda once said, "You could feel the fear on set, like everyone was waiting for an explosion." The irony? While portraying Joan Crawford, a woman often described as cruel, Dunaway reportedly mirrored that same cold energy in real life. Director Frank Perry later admitted he nearly walked off the project because of her extreme outbursts. She threw objects, ripped into makeup artists, and once refused to film until the lighting made her look perfect. Ron Howard cites her as a prime example of what happens when an actor's hunger for control becomes total emotional domination. And the stories kept coming. On The Wicked Lady, she allegedly slapped a cameraman. On Don Juan DeMarco, crew members said she embarrassed assistants so badly that production ground to a halt for a whole day. Her former manager, Jay Bernstein, once remarked, "Faye doesn't just play divas, she becomes them." By the 2000s, the fallout finally hit. Hollywood stopped calling, and directors avoided her like the plague, citing her as too impossible to manage. In 2011, after being removed from a Broadway production of Tea at 5, Dunaway blamed everyone but herself, proving that even decades into her career, the queen of cruelty never lost her icy grip on control. When a journalist asked Ron Howard about Faye Dunaway's legacy, he answered with care, but his words cut sharp. She chased perfection so fiercely she forgot about compassion. Her downfall didn't happen overnight, it unfolded slowly, year after year. The woman who once dominated Hollywood found herself isolated, avoided even at events honoring her own films. To Howard, she became the ultimate warning. Talent without empathy is a ticking bomb. He once said, "People talk about power. In Hollywood, power without grace turns to poison." Then there's John Wayne, the tyrant of the West. Few stars ever stood taller in Hollywood's mythology. To millions, he was America incarnate, the cowboy, the soldier, the unbreakable hero. But to Ron Howard, who grew up watching Wayne on black and white TVs, the legend had a dark underside. Howard revealed that the moment he learned who John Wayne really was, the hero image shattered instantly. "I stopped seeing the hero," he said. "I saw the bully who wore his country like a costume." Born Marion Morrison in Iowa in 1907, Wayne clawed his way through the studio system by selling a fantasy of unbeatable toughness, a brand of masculinity people swallowed whole. By the 1950s, Wayne wasn't just acting, he was pushing an entire worldview. Disagreement was weakness, progress was betrayal, and on set, patience didn't exist. Technicians who fell short got yelled at in front of everyone. Actor Christopher Mitchum said, "When Duke was angry, the air froze, and according to him, you either stood with Wayne or you were gone." Howard reflected that this wasn't art, it was fear disguised as discipline. Wayne's cruelty didn't stop at shouting matches. He belittled women, mocked indigenous performers on westerns, and dismissed black actors who challenged stereotypes. His 1971 Playboy interview still shocks today, filled with harsh claims about indigenous land rights and racist remarks about black Americans, all while bragging that films needed men, not whiners. These resurfacing comments revealed the truth. The patriotic hero everyone adored was behind the camera a man trapped in extreme beliefs, far from the symbol of justice and bravery he portrayed on screen. On the set of The Searchers, John Wayne didn't just act, he fought. He clashed hard with director John Ford over how to bring Ethan Edwards to life. Ford wanted honesty, a portrayal that showed Edwards as hateful, vengeful, and conflicted. Wayne pushed back, insisting on his own version, and in the final cut, the character's cruelty came through loud and clear, just like Wayne's own icy nature. Howard, studying the film years later at USC, said, "It's terrifying because you can't tell where the role ends and the man begins." Even as cancer weakened him near the end of his life, Wayne refused to soften. He brushed off criticism, blamed changing times, and remained locked in his rigid old-school worldview until his death in 1979 at age 72. To the public, he stayed an untouchable icon, but to filmmakers like Howard, Wayne's story was a warning. Power shaped by prejudice doesn't mellow with age, it hardens, it turns bitter. Howard once reflected, "The myth survived, but the man behind it never deserved the legend." Then there's Roman Polanski, the exile of shame. To Ron Howard, his name represented one of Hollywood's darkest truths. "Brilliance can coexist with evil," Howard said, describing how painful it was to realize the reality behind the filmmaker's image. Polanski's career, talent, and reputation dazzled audiences, but the shadow that followed him showed the ugly side of fame, power, and the industry's willingness to protect its own. Ron Howard admitted, "I admired his films before I knew who he really was. Then I realized talent doesn't absolve a person. Sometimes it hides them." Roman Polanski's rise looked unstoppable. Born in Paris in 1933 to Polish parents and surviving the horrors of World War II, he endured tragedy long before Hollywood even knew his name. Early films like Knife in the Water and Rosemary's Baby turned him into a critical darling, a director who could twist dread into chilling, unforgettable art. But as Howard later reflected, the darkness in Polanski's films wasn't just storytelling. It was the shadow of a man hiding storms behind the camera. Then came 1977. Everything changed. Polanski was arrested over a disturbing incident involving a young teenager after a photo session. The legal evidence was damning, and he ultimately pleaded guilty to unlawful conduct with a minor, a serious admission with lifelong consequences. But before sentencing, Polanski fled the United States and settled in France, refusing to return. Hollywood erupted. Some condemned him entirely, while others defended him, calling him a tortured artist, creating a rift that still lingers decades later. For Howard, a young filmmaker watching it all unfold, the reaction was devastating. They spoke of art while a child's life was broken, he said years later, highlighting how the industry twisted itself into excuses rather than choosing accountability. Polanski's self-imposed exile became one of Hollywood's darkest stains, a reminder of how power and talent can shield the guilty. The case never faded, the controversies only grew, and his absence became a symbol of the industry's struggle and frequent failure to confront the wrongs committed by its own powerful figures. For Ron Howard, Rooney's story was the last piece of a chilling pattern, proof that behind Hollywood's brightest smiles, heavy secrets were hiding. He made the world laugh while he was dying inside, Howard said, calling it the saddest kind of evil, when someone's pain becomes their performance and nobody notices until it's too late. To Howard, these stories aren't about revenge, they're warnings. The golden age of Hollywood wasn't golden at all. It was built on silence, on crushing pressure, and on hidden lives masked by fame. He once said, "The scariest monsters aren't in horror films, they're the ones the spotlight protects." If this hit you, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if it made you feel something real. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the dark side of Hollywood's golden age.